صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء المرسلين، حبيب الله العالمين، أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. اللهم اجعل محيانا محيا محمد وآل محمد، ومماتنا وممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولايته سيدنا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, sisters, and respected scholars. So tonight is our last night of our discussion of the Nahj al-Balagha, the book of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in which he describes different aspects that are so important for us to understand. We've already discussed this and you've joined with me for 6 nights so far. So inshallah, let's finish off on a high note and finish off on one of the most important discussions of Nahj al-Balagha inshallah tonight. In one of his famous sermons, Sermon 192, really in the sermon, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he discusses Taqwa and he discusses the muttaqeen. What does it mean for us to be one of the muttaqeen? What does it mean for us to have taqwa? Some people translate the word taqwa into the word, they call it fear. If you have fear, you have taqwa. But when we look at the meaning specifically, we see that in reality, taqwa comes from the word waqaya. The source of the word waqaya is as a protection or as a shield. For a mu'min to have a shield which blocks him from everything else. And this is, for example, someone might have a fear in which they need that shield, right? Someone might be afraid, and that's why we consider it that. But when we look at it in the Islamic concept, we see taqwa is someone who is aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every single moment. We've discussed this in one of our previous nights about taqwa, but tonight I want to discuss it a bit further and get a bit more into this discussion of taqwa. What does it truly mean? We see that in the Quran, the word taqwa comes 251 times. And it's been used in many different times, sometimes as a noun, sometimes it's used as a verb, but it's been said so many times in the Quran. So we need to truly grasp what it means. And in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the beginning of the first surah, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It is for the muttaqin. He says, this is a book in which there is no doubt. A book for the muttaqin, for those who are wary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then of course it continues and discusses it further. We want to look at who this muttaqin is. And it's related that when we begin the sermon 192, there's a follower of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, who's by the name of Hammam. Hammam is a person who comes to Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he was a man who used to worship himself. He used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So he comes to Imam Ali alayhi salam and he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin, describe to me the pious man in such a way that I see him. Describe the muttaqeen. So now Imam Ali alayhi salam is about to respond directly to us, to our question of who is the muttaqeen. Imam Ali alayhi salam at first, he doesn't want to answer him. He gives him a very simple answer. He says, O Hammam, fear Allah and perform good acts. Because, and then he begins the verse of the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مُحْسِنُونَ. Surely Allah is with those who have taqwa, right? Who practice taqwa. Verily Allah is with those who guard themselves, who have the protection, the shield against evil, and those who do good to others. So this is who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. But then Hammam, he responds, he says, he's not satisfied with the answer. He says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, please can you give me more? Imam Ali alayhi salam then prepares, and it feels like, and it said that Imam Ali alayhi salam at that moment, he feels like there's a burden on his chest. There is a lot that he wants to explain. And now he is ready to give all of this information to Hamma. And inshallah, that's what we're going to discuss when he truly goes into this discussion in his famous sermon, Sermon 192, Khutbatul Muttaqeen. He starts discussing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we're going to discuss that. And of course, we're going to go to certain parts to understand the general concepts. Inshallah, with our last discussion, I do want to ask everyone who does have the chance to get a copy of the Nahj al-Balagha, to get a copy of this book, inshallah, in which you can yourselves look into it further and read and benefit from the jewels. Of course, I've said this every night and I want to repeat that tonight, that this is only a bit of the Nahj al-Balagha in which I want to introduce you to it, for you to be more familiarized with it. But when you read Nahj al-Balagha and you start hearing and you start reading the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you truly understand it differently. You understand that this is a code of conduct and life for us. Now he begins, he says, thus the God-fearing in it are the people of distinction. Their speech is to the point, their dress is moderate, and their gait is humble. They keep their eyes closed to what Allah has made unlawful for them. They put their ears to that knowledge in which it is beneficial for them. They remain in the time of trials as though they remain in comfort. If there had not been a fixed period of life ordained for each, their spirits would not have remained in their bodies, even the twinkling of an eye, because of their eagerness for the reward and the fear of chastisement. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, he discusses certain different aspects. He says the muttaqeen, their speech is to the point. They don't waste time speaking about nonsense. What they need to say, they will say. That's one aspect. The speech is to the point. Their dress is very moderate. They're not very extravagant, right? They don't wear too much. They wear a moderate amount. And, of course, they're very humble. That's their demeanor. That's how they act. And they keep their eyes closed to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made unlawful to them. And they put their ears to that knowledge which is beneficial to them. And he says that in the time of trials, I want to look at this specific part. In those time of trials, they are in a feeling of comfort. This is one of the concepts of the muttaqeen. That even though they have so many trials, they have sabran jamila. They have a beautiful patience, in which the Quran says, Fasbir sabran jamila. And for them, this trial, they understand the reality of this trial. And they're so quick to leave this world. He says that if insan was not to pass away, if they didn't have a set period of time which they're going to be on this earth, they would want to leave as soon as they can. Because of course, they have that which is in the akhirah, which they know is much better for them, not which is within this world. And so everything else appears small in their eyes in that matter. And then I want to read this part. Thus to them, paradise is as though they see it and are enjoying its favors. To them, hell is also as if they see it and they are suffering from the punishment of it. And I wanted to discuss this in the Holy Quran. We have so many different verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about heaven and hell. And we read it so many times, we've read it so many times that now it just becomes second nature to us. Jannatun tajri tahti al-anhar, right? It says heavens in which there are rivers flowing underneath it. We read this so quickly, right? Once we get to that point in the Quran, sometimes we have it memorized so we don't even look at the page. Jannatun tajri tahti al-anhar, right? We say that there is the heaven in which there's rivers flowing under it. Just one aspect like that. He says the mu'min, when he hears it, he smiles. He feels as if he's in Jannah. So this is the aspect of the Quran that we don't pay attention much to. Especially during these nights of Ramadan. When you're reading the 30 juz or so, for those who are doing the khatma of the Quran. Do you take every single moment when you hear Bihisht, when do you hear Jannah, when you hear heaven? What's your reaction to it? Is it just you read by it quickly? It says those believers, when they're reminded of paradise, when they think of paradise, their hearts feel as if they're in paradise. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about hell, it talks about it in a way that they feel that they're in hell. They feel those flames when they're reading those verses. When they hear the nar, which is in the Quran, they feel so afraid of it. This is one aspect of the muttaqeen that I wanted to discuss. This is one of the focal concepts. that we want to discuss about muttaqin. That they feel the heaven and they feel the hell that exists. And they're all so wary about it, and they're so excited to leave this world, to go to that next world. So that's one aspect of the muttaqin. And I want to return back to a specific discussion about the taqwa, the muttaqin. There's a very famous saying that for someone who has taqwa, they feel like they're being watched at every single moment, right? That's one of the most important ways to understand taqwa. That they feel, sometimes when we're in the masjid or so, right? We start praying so many salah. We start reading extra verses of the Quran. Why? Because we're being watched. There are other people who are watching us. How can you forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you every single moment and every single day? There's not a moment or not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't miss. So when you come here, for example, is it taqwa that you have that causes you to pray those extra rak'ats? Is it taqwa that causes you to read those extra verses? Because we can easily do it at home. So that's another aspect of taqwa that we need to understand. That in every single moment, once you're outside of the masjid, in your home, in your prayers, feel as though there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is watching you. You feel His presence in every single moment. That's what a muttaqin is. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, the next concept in which he discusses, he says, they're not satisfied with their meager good acts, and they do not regard their major acts as great. They always blame themselves and are afraid of their deeds. When any one of them is spoken of highly, he says, I know myself better than others, and my Lord knows me better than I know. O Allah, do not deal with me according to what they say, and make me better than they think of me, and forgive me for my shortcomings, which they do not know. The muttaqin, they don't consider themselves any high. They don't consider themselves blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say, when someone, for example, says, wow, you're so faithful, or so, oh wow, you prayed so many salats. The muttaqin, he says, Ya Allah, make me so that I'm even greater than that which they consider me. And Ya Allah, forgive me for those sins that are hidden from them, that they aren't aware about. The muttaqin, he considers himself that he hasn't done enough. For example, there was someone who came to, at the time of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. We know Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, of course his name is the adornment of the worshippers, the beauty of the worshippers. So of the most beautiful of worshippers was Imam Zayn al-Abidin. And it is said that someone came to him after he prayed his salah, and he said, Ya Imam Zayn al-Abidin. He says, wow, your prayers are so beautiful, you pray so much, you pray too much. He says, how can you say that? I have not prayed as much as Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. I didn't pray as much as Imam Ali alayhi salam. I haven't prayed as much as the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And he compares us to those who are so much higher. He doesn't consider himself, of course, comparing to those who are lower than himself. He believes that even though I've prayed this much, it's not enough. Us ourselves, when we pray that which is the wajibat, we feel that we've done enough. We say, Alhamdulillah, Ya Allah, I prayed those which are my wajibats. I'm very happy for which I've done. That's enough for me for today. The muttaqin says, no, Allah, Ya Allah, I haven't prayed enough. I haven't thanked you for all of your bounties. I haven't thanked you for all of those blessings. That's what he said it means when he says they're not satisfied with only meager good acts. And they don't consider those acts as such major acts or so good. They say, Ya Allah, I've done that which is so little. Help me so which I can do even more. So that's the second concept we want to discuss of the muttaqin. One who is very wary about his hereafter, who is so prepared for the hereafter, and he's so happy when he hears about the Jannah. That's one aspect. And the second focal aspect is, of course, the mu'min or the muttaqin who considers his good acts less. And when he's ever heard of, for example, of a high position, he says, Ya Allah, make me higher than that position. I'm not that which they say to me. There's so many sins that I have that they're not aware about. And Ya Allah, please forgive me of those sins. He says that's the second core concept of a muttaqin. And there's some more discussions that happen later on, of course, about the muttaqin. And then one of the third ones, of course, that we want to discuss is when he discusses the indecent speech. He talks about the tongue of insan. He says, indecent speech is far from him. His utterance is lenient. His evils are non-existent. His virtues are ever present. The tongue is so important in how much heavy it is. There's a very famous saying from one of our imams. He says, the tongue is so small, but it's so heavy. You can destroy your life in just moments with your tongue, right? It's such a heavy thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us such a blessing with our tongue. But do we understand how much we have to pay attention to that which we say? He says the mu'min, he praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his tongue. But of course there are others who use this tongue against them, and it said that of course in the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge you based on what you say with your tongue. When you stand up on the final day, on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what is it that you said? And then in that moment our tongue is going to speak for us. So we want to watch, of course, what we say. There's so much that we've done, that we've said with our tongue, that maybe we wish that we could take back, but we can't. So in that way, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says that he doesn't curse, indecent speech is far from him. His utterance is lenient, and of course he said that he's very to the point. So that's one of the next fundamental points of a mu'min, in which that which he speaks, if he is silent, his silence does not grieve him. If he laughs, he doesn't raise his voice. If he is wronged, he endures till Allah takes revenge on his behalf. His own self is in distress because of him, while the people are at ease for him. He puts himself in hardship for the sake of his next life, and he makes people feel safe from him, from himself. His keeping away from others is by the way of asceticism and purification. Remember, we said asceticism is zuhud. Our discussion we had on zuhud previously. And his nearness to those whom he is near is by the way of leniency and mercifulness. His keeping away is not by the way of vanity or feeling of greatness. We said vanity, of course, feeling you're so high, which is one of the ways shaitan, of course, tricks us. Nor his nearness by the way of deceit and cheating. Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
And these are the discussions of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. It said that after Hammam hears this, he goes into shock. Imam Ali alayhi salam knew that he was going to, of course, he couldn't handle that which he discusses about the muttaqeen. And it said that he's in shock and then he passes away. This is the eloquence of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in the way that Mawla discusses the muttaqeen in a way that this person wasn't even expecting. Hammam, it said that he passes away because of this. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, then he says, verily by Allah I had this fear about him. Then he added, he says, effective advices produce such effects on receptive minds. So then someone else says to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin, how is it that you do not receive such an effect? Imam Ali alayhi salam says, woe to you, for death there is a fixed hour which cannot be exceeded, and a cause which does not change. Now look, never repeat such talk which Satan has put in your tongue. So this is the words of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And that's the end of our discussion. Of course, we're short on time. And now the adhan is near, the adhan al-Maghrib. So I want to, of course, thank all of you who have joined me in this discussion, on this journey of the Nahj al-Balagha. And of course, to thank all of you, for thank the masjid, of course, for the opportunities that they've given me. Inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us more of an introduction to the Nahj al-Balagha, to get us more near to the Nahj al-Balagha, just like He's gotten us near to the Holy Quran in this blessed month. Inshallah, that we can become one of the loyal followers of As-Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. And inshallah, Ya Allah, we ask you to make us the best of those worshippers who worship you because they've seen you to be the only one worthy of His worship. And Ya Allah, we ask you to bring us near to our Imam, to make us and our children one of the loyal companions of As-Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. And Ya Allah, we ask you to keep us away from the evil, the shar which you have created. And Ya Allah, we ask you to inshallah give us the tawfiq to make the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah, and make the ziyarah of those who are the blessed progeny. And Ya Allah, we ask you to guide us into the straight path, the one that is Sirat al-Mustaqim, and that which is right reaches to you. And Ya Allah, we ask you not to take away from us from this world unless you have forgiven us from our sins. عجل اللهم في فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
أحسنت يا